ask you to judge me by the enemies I have made. You have enemies, good, that means you've stood up for something, sometime in your life. I count him braver who overcomes his desires than him who conquers his enemies, for the hardest victory is over self. Forgive your enemies, but never forget their names. A wise man gets more use from his enemies than a fool from his friends. Ideas are more powerful than guns. We would not let our enemies have guns. Why should we let them have ideas? The battlefield is a scene of constant chaos. The winner will be the one who controls that chaos, both his own and the enemy's. Never explain. Your friends do not need it, and your enemies will not believe you anyway. Do I not destroy my enemies, and I make them my friends? The man of knowledge must be able not only to love his enemies, but also to hate his friends. If you want peace, you don't talk to your friends, you talk to your enemies. Always forgive your enemies. Nothing annoys them so much. A man who has made no enemies is probably not a very good man. I no doubt deserved my enemies, but I don't believe I deserved my friends. Beware of no man more than of yourself. We carry our worst enemies within us. I have no friends and no enemies, only competitors. Man's enemies are not demons, but human beings like himself. As a matter of self-preservation, a man needs good friends or ardent enemies. For the former, instruct him, and the latter, take him to task. Progress is a nice word, but change is its motivator, and change has its enemies. If we could read the secret history of our enemies, we should find in each man's life sorrow and suffering enough to disarm all hostility. War is the remedy that our enemies have chosen, and I say, let us give them all they want. You can calculate the worth of a man by the number of his enemies, and the importance of a work of art by the harm that is spoken of it. If you want to make enemies, try to change something. Only enemies speak the truth. Friends and lovers lie endlessly, caught in the web of duty. You don't make peace with friends. You make it with very unsavory enemies. It is not enough for me to win. My enemies must lose. Enemies make you stronger. Allies make you weaker. Real men laugh at opposition. Real men smile when enemies appear. We often give our enemies the means for our own destruction. If you don't have enemies, you don't have character. It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends. Be loyal to those who are loyal to you, and respect everyone, even your enemies and competition. Friends come and go, but enemies accumulate. The enemies cannot destroy the king who is at his service. The respect and friendship of the wise men who can find fault disagree, and correct him. Observe your enemies, for they first find out your faults. Let my enemies devour each other. I don't wish jail on nobody, not even my worst enemies. The enemies of freedom do not argue, they shout and they shoot. Isn't it the sweetest mockery to mock our enemies? Even a parano can have enemies. People crushed by laws have no hope but to evade power. If the laws are their enemies, they will be enemies to the law, and those who have most to hope and nothing to lose will always be dangerous. Wars teach us not to love our enemies, but to hate our allies. Do good to your friends to keep them, to your enemies to win them. I don't want enemies, I want friends, and I want them in all shapes, sizes, and colors, and loving whoever they want to. Always write angry letters to your enemies. Never mail them. An excellent man, he has no enemies, and none of his friends like him. The last of our enemies is laid low. It's said in Hollywood that you should always forgive your enemies because you never know when you'll have to work with them. He will never have true friends who is afraid of making enemies. Old friends become bitter enemies on a sudden for toys and small offenses. All are my friends, I have no enemies. Instead of loving your enemies, treat your friends a little better. You don't make peace with your friends, you make peace with your enemies. He has no enemies, but is intensely disliked by his friends. As our enemies have found we can reason like men, so now let us show them we can fight like men also. Never hate your enemies, it affects your judgment. A friend is one who has the same enemies as you have. Bodyguards offer fake security. The real security comes from having your enemies know nothing about you.